for the people who are listening who they've already done that, right?
Yeah.
They've already brought the fully baked idea to market and now they're sitting there in front of their investors like, do you want to continue, yes or no? And, you know, in your case, you said, I want to continue. I'm going to change the business model.
Yeah.
If you could just speak to that.
Totally. I'm totally guilty, right? Like I did that. I'm an optimist. People were like, oh, however many percentage of businesses fail. Every founder takes about 10 years to get to the right traction and all this. And I would think in my head, I'd be like, yeah. And then I'd think in my head, but not me. My idea is right. And
I love that.
I was so wrong. Like I was dead wrong.
Welcome to Seriously Connected. I'm Heidi, and today we're going to talk about perfecting the pivot. This is incredibly important. I've made a lot of pivots in my career, and it's important to make sure that you're looking forward and looking back whenever you're pivoting. My guest, Alissa McDonald, is going to talk about her businesses, Pop PD and Good Hype. She's going to talk about how to pivot and also how to fail fast. You won't want to miss it. So here's my hot take for you. Startup Tech Valley is a great place where you can go and meet other people who are doing startup activity in the capital region. Tonight is Startup Tech Valley, which is located in Troy, New York at Browns. You don't want to miss it. We'll put the URL in the show notes. So Alissa, I'm so pumped to have you on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me here. This is exciting.
It is. We've been trying to get coffee, so I figured that instead of getting coffee, I would bring you on the podcast so we could catch up.
We'll just do our coffee and kind of have people listening in. That's perfect.
Right.
I don't have coffee. I only have water. But
yeah, that's right.
It counts.
Yeah, I think it counts. I think bubbly water counts like coffee.
Yeah.
I actually am kind of addicted to bubbly water.
Obsessed. What's your favorite kind?
I run the gamut. I do.
Okay.
And we always have a variety in my refrigerator, but I do like coconut from time to time.
Ooh, yeah.
Pomegranate.
I like a lemon.
You know, I was big into the citrus, and then I fell off the citrus wagon. I can't do citrus anymore.
It is summery, so maybe you're a seasonal sparkling water person.
So first, I would love to just talk to you about, what you're doing now. You and I met maybe like 3 years ago.
I know. I was thinking about that on the way here. I was a baby entrepreneur at that time. I feel still like a baby, but.
I love that. So what are you doing now?
So I am, I'm kind of all over the place. I think I probably should start back at the beginning because if listeners haven't heard my journey, if that's okay, just like
please.
a quick, I'll make it brief, but I was a teacher for 13 years. And I won't say that I always thought I was going to do just that because there was this little part of me that always wanted to do something more. As a kid, I thought I would be like a magazine editor in New York City, but turns out that when I was in high school, there weren't that many options. You were going to be a teacher. You were going to be a police officer. Like my mom was a teacher, so that's where I went. And I loved teaching. But there was a point in my career where I kind of looked around and said, okay, what's next? And in teaching, there's not much. It's you want to be a principal or do you want to be a superintendent? And I didn't want to be either of those things. So I also had, to back up a bit, I had a store in downtown Glens Falls with my sister. Prior to that, while I was teaching, so probably in 2012, I had started that. And
what was the store?
It was called Downtown Charm. I laugh because it feels like a blip, but now looking back, it all makes sense. Everything makes sense when you're looking back, but I was doing it on the side of teaching. She had the idea. We're both really entrepreneurial. Like we would get together and go to dinner and just talk about business ideas. It's just who we are. And she was into painting old furniture. So going to like flea market auctions and things like that, picking up cheap pieces of furniture and then like restoring them. I hated doing that. I like thrifting. I love thrifting. But I didn't like the crafting part of it. But she convinced me to open the store in Glens Falls. And so we did. And it was great. Like it was wonderful. We had music on and it was right on the main street and opened the door. Like it was really nice. But I leaned more into the marketing because I didn't really like the crafting or decorating the store. I had no idea what I was doing. So I did have that marketing background. Fast forward to when I was in my teaching career and trying to figure out what was next. I started helping teachers build their personal brands. So I saw an opportunity where teachers could be leaders and make money being leaders by doing consulting and professional development for schools. Now, at this time, this was in around 2018, so we were just starting to have like these virtual tools to be able to support teachers around the United States versus I'm a teacher in South Glens Falls and I'm going to go consult a school in Saratoga. Now I can do this around the U.S. So that's kind of what I started doing, is using that marketing background and helping teachers build up their own marketing so that they could reach more schools. And that somehow landed me into Pop PD, which is I had this idea somewhere along the line. I was like, why isn't there a website where teachers who are consultants can go and advertise their services, and then administrators can go on and they can find those teachers? Why doesn't that exist? And one of my mentors at the time looked at me and said, well, why don't you do it? And I was like, what? No, like, I'm not technical. I don't even know, like, I know how to build a website, but what's a startup? What am I even doing? And then I started researching startups and getting investment and all of that stuff. And so now I'm 3 years into Pop PD. We raised venture capital. We've pivoted 1,000 times. We've learned, and I say we. My co-founder has left at this point, not because we had a falling out, but because we were doing this at the sacrifice of our families, our incomes. We put a lot into it. We can dig into that too. But she had to get a full-time job. I really should have a full-time job, but I'm still scrapping away at this because I believe in it, and we've learned so much. So I'm doing that, but on the side, I have a marketing agency because I need to make money on the side. So if anybody needs marketing help, I'm available.
I'm so excited to talk to you about both of those things.
Okay, great.
I was thinking that today the theme that we could have is perfecting the pivot.
Yeah.
And I think that's because, at least in my life, I totally agree with you. Like, retrospectively in my life, like, everything makes sense. Like,
yes.
Even so, I started Plum Oyster Bar. Even that makes sense from an economic development standpoint in my mind now. Yeah. I didn't know that that's what I was doing, but it makes sense to me now.
And it feels confusing, and it feels like there's such imposter syndrome around it.
Oh, yeah.
I used to talk about the store in Glens Falls, like, oh, yeah, I had this little store. I don't know how that fit in. And now looking back, I'm like, oh, that was really cool. And I learned a ton.
It is really cool.
Yeah. So, you just have to accept that your journey is going to be winding, and there's no normal. So don't try to fit into normalcy.
And also, when people who are normal, who are not my people, by the way.
Yes,
the people
I have to
who are,
accept that.
you know what I mean? Like, the people who are normal are not my people. Like, I don't super relate to them. I do find that sometimes they're like, oh, like, you jump around. And for a while, I took that as just such a knife to my, back
what are
or
you
heart.
doing now?
What are you doing now?
What are you working on now? I hate that question.
I was at a meeting with engineers the other day, and it was actually, they were cool engineers, okay? And so I was at a meeting with engineers and people who were interested in entrepreneurship in the Capital Region. And what I loved is when we were introducing ourselves, these are people who are very, who fit probably more squarely in the normal category. Yeah. But they were describing their journeys because, when somebody's at GE, they're not staying on one project for a long time.
Yeah. And that's okay, right?
And that's totally
there's
okay.
No stigma
when
there.
When someone's at McKinsey, they're not staying in one project, and there's no stigma.
Yeah.
And so I even said, when it got to me to introduce myself, I said, I'm so thankful that the two of you went first, because sometimes I water down my pivots. Mm-hmm. I water down my pivots.
Just in that story I was just doing right there. It's taken me a long time to, be able to tell the story succinctly, but to tie the pieces together in a story took me a long time, and I didn't like introducing myself, and I still struggle with it. And especially in teaching, talk about normalcy. When you talk to people who knew me in my teaching career, and they're like, oh, and I don't think that they are like this. I think they think, oh, Alissa, she's doing something really cool. But sometimes I feel like they're like, what the heck is she doing?
Yeah.
What is that weird thing?
It's the tone. It's the tone,
I think most of them just don't know.
Yeah.
They don't know. They're like, what is this path?
Well, so something that I didn't know when we first met, because you were explaining to me Pop PD, and I was like, teacher consultants, like, tell me more. And so I didn't even know about this whole, customer base. I didn't even know about this exchange of information. I didn't know that teachers buy a lot of their content. Yeah, which is a little crazy. So do you want to just quickly talk about the problem that Pop PD is solving?
For sure. So teacher professional development. When you go to college as a teacher, you go to your undergrad program, you have your master's degree. You learn a lot of teaching methods, but you also learn a lot of theory. So when you first get to the classroom, the first day, and there are 25 kids staring back at you, And now you're taking all of your theory and a little bit of methods, and you're like, oh my God, how do I apply this to 25 kids? And new teachers especially, we're losing them. We're losing teachers at an alarming rate, and for so many reasons. But one of them is they need the support. They need ongoing support beyond college. It's not like college and now I'm a teacher and it's perfect. No, I need ongoing support and training with things like instructional strategies. I have 25 kids of all different levels. How do I level the content? How do I have a curriculum. Great, thank you, school district. But how do I implement that curriculum in a way that resonates with my students? The students I have in front of me, one of them has ADHD. One of them we're trying to get diagnosed. And how do I deal with that specific problem this year with this group of students? So there's so much professional development. Schools spend $16 billion annually on professional development.
Schools do.
Yeah.
And I bet teachers spend more money too.
That's the problem. What's happening with professional development money, and maybe this is a little bit of a hot take, but I even think school leaders and administrators would agree with me on this, is like sometimes they don't know how to spend the money best. They have the money to spend, but what's the best way? And the traditional way was that you would fly in this expert consultant, somebody who, has retired from teaching and is coming back. You bring them in by plane, you put them up in lodging, you bring them in, you get all substitutes for all of your teachers, you put them in a big conference room for the day with this consultant or this group of consultants, and it's basically like kind of college classes, workshops and stuff all day. In theory, okay, great, but kind of expensive because now you've paid for this person to come in and then they go back home. And now you're in front of these 25 students again. And you're like, even if that professional development was good, which not all of them are good, even if it was good, now these kids are looking at you and you're back to square one. It was theory. Again, teaching is an art and a science, and you need support and coaching along the way. And that is whether you're a new teacher or a veteran teacher. There's so many changes all the time. And I won't even get into what's coming next in education, but this is all such important work. And with Pop PD, we are trying to get schools to rethink the way they're spending their money. Can we spend it on a consultant who can work with you in person and virtually, so that when they go back to their home, there is a workspace where they can then continue to coach teachers in their practice and using AI and video and different tools to continue to coach them, even though they're not present with them. So that teachers have the support, we can keep teachers in classrooms.
And so when you're working on Pop PD, so you, the co-founder and you have kind of just, for not a bad reason, but have stopped working together.
We had a wonderful relationship. She's also an educator. We had a wonderful relationship. I think, looking back, we built the foundations of this company so strong. And we spent a lot of time and we were very intentional about our systems and the way we built team and the way we worked together. She's from Boston, so we would have quarterly retreats, and the way we spent our time at our retreats was intentional. Everything we did was so intentional. It set us up to hit the ground running. And I'm not going to blame where we are on the market and the changes and everything, but we started in 2022. We raised money in 2022, and the landscape has completely changed in fundraising. What's happening in education has changed. So many changes. Teachers were paying for professional development when we first started out. They were shelling out a lot of money because they desperately needed the support. And so since their professional development their school was putting on wasn't working, they still are, but they would shell out their own money for professional development and resources. That's shifted a bit. Teachers don't have the money anymore. And I don't think they had it back then, but just 2 years later, with the economy the way that it is, it's just not where they're able to spend their money.
So one of the things that we've talked about on this podcast before is, you have a business that is located in the capital region, but you went outside the capital region for resources. Yeah. You did Techstars, right?
Yeah.
So can you just talk a little bit about, why you needed to leave the region to do that? Mm-hmm. And maybe there's a myth, I think, that a lot of economic developers buy into that says if you can't find every resource that you need for your business in the region, then you're going to pick up and move. And so could you just talk a little bit about, your utilization of the Techstars program, locating here, what it meant to use that resource, and why you're still here?
Yeah, I love this. So we went to Techstars first, right out of the gate. I don't know. I don't know. I couldn't tell you why. I don't know anything about tech. So that was the part that I felt the most insecure about. But someone at Techstars saw something in us. I think they really believed in our mission and believed in Megan and I because we had the domain expertise. We did the Techstars Anywhere program. So that is fully remote, but you have 3 in-person weeks. And so we had one in San Diego, one in Miami, and one in Austin, Texas. And the rest of it was virtual. I laugh because the others in my cohort kind of teased me. I was the one from the smallest town. Everyone else was New York, San Francisco, Boston. I think that was pretty much it. A lot of just really knowledgeable, really smart people. And they just kind of tease me because I'm like, oh, I'm from a little town in upstate New York. And they're like, New York City. And I'm like, no, the state above New York City. Like, there's more than just the city there. And looking back, I spent way too much time looking at resources outside of our region. I did not know. I mean, I was so new. I did not know what was here. Now I know. And in going to San Diego and Miami and Austin, their startup ecosystems are cool. Of course, their resources, the co-working spaces, the people you're around, so great, but also so big, such a big pond, and you're such a small fish. And here, I think while we might not have every resource, you are welcomed with open arms. You are noticed. I've been invited to things. I've gone to award ceremonies. I've been in the newspapers. Like, the support here has been great, but I still need to make more connections. I need to get out of my office, my in-home office little bit more.
You were saying that, when you started, you didn't really know what the resources were, but now you kind of do. And then I know it's hard because you learn resources over time, but could you break down, like, what was the most impactful thing that helped you learn about what was available here?
I'm going to say Catherine from Palette. It's like the number one thing. I had a Palette membership, and I'm not just like promoting it to promote. She is just such a connector. And she was one of the first ones that I went to and said, like, hey, I'm doing this thing. And I felt small. Like, I was like, I don't know what I'm doing here. She just has this way of looking at you with such optimism. Like, the thing you're doing, doesn't matter what it is just the coolest thing. And she connected me to you. She connected me to a couple of other people in the area. And it's just in taking those meetings and being at Palette and just being reassured that there are people here. And actually, I'm getting more support here than some of the founders in New York City were getting, because there's just a million of them there.
Yeah, totally. And I think that, a lot of times people ask me, how do we develop programs for entrepreneurs? And part of my response is, we can create these structured programs, but a lot of what we need to create are opportunities for people to have those one-on-one connections, because it's exactly what you said. Yeah. It's that Catherine, in your case, right? Yeah. Catherine was opening the door for you with a lot of people. And I've found in my career is that if I remain open to opportunities, I don't say no to meetings. I've actually talked about this a little bit on the podcast because I'm getting to the point where I actually can't say yes to every meeting. And so I'm like trying to figure out, anyway, that's like a personal quest,
It's hard.
It's like, it's really hard. Yeah. It's really, really
you can't
hard.
Get a whole lot done when you're always in meetings.
I know.
I'm an introvert. So saying yes to a meeting for me, I'm a mom of 3. I mostly work from home. I'm an introvert. But when I get there, I'm so reinvigorated. And I do believe really in building up our area and sharing resources. And so many people have given their time to me. I would love to be able to give back at some point. So it's just you just got to do it.
Yeah.
It's you never know why it's going to benefit you till you're there.
I know, it's true. And so I just don't say no to meeting. And that really has served me very well. Yeah. It served me very well in taking those opportunities. Okay, so back to the pivot. So we've kind of talked a little bit about Pop PD, but now, so what are you doing now? It's Good Hype, right?
Yeah, so that's actually maybe not such a pivot. I guess my first pivot was within Pop PD. So we really Megan was my co-founder, and I hit a point. So we had the one investor, Techstars, and we had another tech investor, Beta Boom VC. They're impact-focused investors. They're amazing. It's a husband and wife team, Kimmy and Sergio. That is the other support that if we didn't have them, I would not still be going. We meet with them, or I meet with them now, every month, and they give us some advisement. So we hit a point in Pop PD where we had run out of that pre-seed funding, but we spent a lot of the pre-seed funding on building an MVP, testing our audiences, and learning so much. But there comes a point where our traction wasn't enough to raise a seed round. So it's like, do we close our doors now? And I am an eternal optimist. And I was like, I can't close the doors. We've come too far. And we were in a meeting with Sergio, Megan and I, and he said, are you done? And she said, yes. And I said, no. And so that was the first, I think, time where I had to pivot. And this is our rock bottom, right? Like, we've taken the investment. We've gone through the investment. We've took huge cuts in our own salaries. And my husband works for a nonprofit in the area. So, like, we are not swimming in it. 3 little kids, play sports. So we had sacrificed at this point, and we kind of just looked at each other in the meeting, and I was like, that's okay. Like, that's okay. I'll keep going here. So I had to pivot. I had to pivot in Pop PD with, like, okay, who's the market now? How am I going to show growth? I needed to stop meeting with investors. I spent way too much time meeting with investors in the first half trying to get that seed round. I was like, I'm done. I'm going to just try to bootstrap this now on my own. And so that was kind of pivot number 1. And in doing that, I needed money. Like, I had to make money. My husband, bless him, because I don't know why he hasn't left me yet, because I'm not, like, my job, entrepreneurship is not secure. It's a big risk. And especially, there's a lot of talk about, like, oh, you should, founders, they live on ramen noodles. And I'm like, okay, well, my kids love ramen. I can't live in my mom's basement and eat ramen. Like, that's a cool story, but I'm 40 and I have kids. And anyway, so Good Hype is my way of making money on the side so that I can keep bootstrapping Pop PD. And it's a marketing agency, but we're meant to be an augmented marketing team. So the people who are on your team. You basically borrow our team if you're not ready yet to hire a full-time marketer or you need some support. Because my background is so strongly in now startup world after being 3 years in and in marketing. So that's been, and we work with impact-focused businesses. So that's been a cool way to make money on the side. Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit more about Good Hype. So who are your clients? What does it look like? What do you do for them?
So it's a lot of education companies, which has come really full circle. And so it kind of informs what I'm doing at Pop PD. So it doesn't feel very different. I work with curriculum creators, consultants, ed tech companies, and we come in and do their full stack of marketing. So we have, it would be myself as a marketing strategist. We have a content creator. So we do everything from blog posts, webinars, podcasts, video, whatever they need. And we pull their whole strategy together and try to essentially be their first foundational marketing piece in their business.
So can we talk a little bit about the decision to continue with Pop PD?
Yeah, sure.
So at the moment that you have one co-founder say, like, no, I'm not moving forward, you have supportive investors, I assume.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And then you're going to bootstrap it. So no more raising money. That, the cap table is what it is.
Oh, I could use an angel investor.
I
did call my dad at one point.
Yeah.
Like, hey, could I have a little money?
Right.
But yes, I wouldn't. I don't want to do a big seed round.
You don't want to do a big seed round, yeah. And so in the end, I feel like angel investment, like, that's a form of bootstrapping too. That's a form of bootstrapping.
Well, I could use a thought partner,
right?
And so that's what I'm really looking for right now. I did look at startup studios, that sort of thing. Yep. They take a lot of equity, and we've already been through an accelerator, but I need a thought partner now. So without Megan, I have the support of my current investors. I am doing a studio that is not an investment studio with another ed tech investor, where they sort of like work with you in a studio format and then decide if they want to make their investment.
Okay.
So that's been kind of cool. But I need a thought partner. It's really, really hard to do it on your own.
Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah, there's like 2 schools of thought, I feel like, in investors. Like, I hear some investors who are like, I will never invest in like 2 or more founders because, there's something that always happens, or I'll only invest in like a single founder where,
Interesting.
I know. Yeah.
Yeah. I've had a lot of, because I'm non-technical, so a lot of pushback on that piece.
Okay.
Which is interesting because I don't think that's necessarily needed, but I am kind of on the part of me is thinking about a technical co-founder because
Yeah.
it would be easier to just have somebody who is building on the side. Right now I have to fix it myself, or if I want a new feature, I have to pay a dev team to do it. So
Yep.
kind of both of those.
So in the capital region, like what do those decisions look like?
Oof.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I feel like in a bigger market, finding
Mm-hmm.
a CTO looks very different than in this market
Yeah.
finding a CTO. Would that person be local? Like where would you look for them?
Oh,
You
yeah.
know, what would that decision look like? And I guess what would that decision look like in the in the framing of being in upstate New York?
Yeah, so having a co-founder in Boston was the best because we would meet halfway in Northampton, Massachusetts, every quarter, and that was life-giving. And then we would go back, and it always felt like we were 10 times more productive after we had been together. So in thinking about the search for another co-founder, a technical co-founder, I would love that person to be here. For sure could find someone remotely, I think, and that they would maybe specialize in ed tech, which could be interesting. And I have looked at Y Combinator has like a co-founder matching. So I've kind of been poking around in there in some of my networks. But I think it's more important that they're local. I think it's more important that we're in the same space more often.
Yeah, so that's so interesting. So where do you look for that person? And I'm
know.
asking because we a lot of times I come from this kind of background of economic development, right? And so a lot of times we talk about things like our brain drain, or we talk about and granted, I don't think you'd be looking necessarily at like a recently minted undergraduate to join as the CTO, right?
Yeah.
But there is, the loss of that undergraduate does impact you.
Yeah.
Because if we export them,
Yeah.
they're not going to grow here to the point where you could find them to be the CTO
True.
because they're already gone,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so from an education perspective, I would just love to hear, I mean, this is like a broader question or like, so we have 24 higher education institutions.
Right.
That is just second to Boston in the
Really?
number
I didn't
of
even know that.
undergraduates and graduate students that we have here. Second to Boston.
So much of this I don't know, and I should know more about.
Well, I mean, the higher education, it's that is kind of my roots, right? Is higher education. And I feel like in this area, we don't do a great job of showing pathways for undergraduates to stay here.
Yeah.
And then if they don't stay here for 10 years, they're not going to reach a point where they could be a co-founder of a company.
Right. That makes so much sense.
It's a struggle.
I would not be opposed to an undergraduate as a co-founder.
Oh, that's cool.
Or, I mean, a recent graduate.
Well, I see undergraduates all the time, so I
Okay.
will definitely
Keep an eye
keep
out.
an eye out for that.
I
Yeah.
just am looking for somebody who cares about
Yep.
impact, because at the end of the day, that we are a mission-focused company, for-profit mission-focused company, and I really am looking for somebody who is driven by that, and
Yeah.
it's not just an afterthought.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I teach social entrepreneurship, and the students that I teach, I have to tell you that most students that I interact with, whether they're in that class or not, the businesses that they want to create or join are all mission focused.
That's awesome.
Isn't that
That's
so
great.
cool?
That's great.
It's this big shift, and it happened like recently.
Yeah.
The shift.
Good for them. This generation, I'll tell you.
I know. I tell you. I know. You have 3 kids, right?
Yes.
It's like
Yeah.
It's
Yep. They're gonna do good stuff in the world, I think.
yeah. So possibly a CTO.
Yeah.
Right. Possibly, an angel investment.
Yep.
So what is that? And again, like looking at Capital Region, like really, like what does that what questions do you wake up with every day? Like what does that path look like for you?
Well, in finding an investor, oh boy, I learned a lot about fundraising, probably the most about fundraising in the couple of years that we were in this, because we were really pushed. When I joined Techstars in 2022, the common pathway was you didn't go straight for growth. You went out and did a lot of customer discovery, a lot of testing of your MVP. You came to your seed round with your learnings. But somewhere in there, it kind of changed to you go to the seed round with your traction. And so a lot of time was spent, I think, just our no's were just, you just don't have enough traction. That wasn't what we were focused on. Now I'm at the point where our learnings are so, like I sat down with a beta user the other day, and the things she was asking for were so clear cut, and it's the same thing that the other beta users are asking. Like, we're right there. We just need to now hit the growth trajectory. So I would be looking, in thinking about who I want to put my head together with in this region. I would be looking for someone who just had the business know-how to help me make that shift from learnings to growth, so that we could get to a seed round eventually, I think. I don't know.
Yeah, that's so interesting. That's so interesting because, that type of customer discovery, I feel like, is the cornerstone of.
It's so great.
It's great. It's so important, right? But you're right. There's this moment where it kind of shifts to traction.
Exactly.
And do you have the users?
Yeah.
And what does it cost to get those users on the platform?
Yeah, and there's a difference with where I'm struggling now. It's like I have a user of my MVP. I thank her on every call for not going to our competitor because our MVP is ridiculous. It's duct taped together. She's like, I need this feature. I'm saying, well, I can't build that, but I can duct tape our way there. And she's like, okay. And so I can't really grow because I need to build some more tech infrastructure. So just deciding what's the next step to take. And then I think connecting with people in the education space. To your point about having these higher ed institutions around here and having just a really strong education ecosystem in upstate New York, I would love to tap into that a little bit more. So if I did have an investor or some thought partner that could help me tap into that network, I have not done a great job of that, but I should be tapped into the local education system.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Do you find that, so as a college professor, I make my own syllabi. You know what I mean? So it's just a little different, or at least I perceive it to be different than teaching in high school or teaching in elementary school because that curriculum is there. So could you, what does it look like to take that curriculum and ensure that the products that you have on Pop PD speak to that curriculum, right? Because there are different, I'm sure, exams and things like that that students have to hit benchmarks and things like that. So what does it look like for Pop PD? Because and correct me, my understanding is that Pop PD, the consultants and other people are creating the content for other people to buy.
This is our pivot. So in the beginning, like I mentioned earlier, that coach said to me, why don't you build that website? In the beginning, it was literally a marketplace of consultants and teachers who were wanting to buy and it was online courses. So the consultant would record an online course, the teacher would buy it on whatever topic. But it usually wasn't curriculum based. It's usually based in instructional strategies or how to work with a student who has a specific need, really timely, relevant trainings. I'm trying to think how to teach math in a workshop style. So not necessarily, you could kind of fill in the blank with your curriculum. But what we learned, and maybe it took us too long to learn this, but what we learned is that schools are not ready to go fully virtual with the professional development yet. They are not looking to buy online courses. And so we started to develop a coaching platform. So now what the platform is we have, we work with consultants who are verified. They have good content to bring into schools, and you work with one of our consultants on the site. More of a coaching style. So you're messaging with them, you're sending them teaching videos, they're giving you feedback. It's perfect for new teachers. And so it's really meant to facilitate that hybrid interaction and doesn't really have to do with the fill in the blank with the curriculum. Yeah.
So to kind of take a step back for just anybody who's coming up with a business model, right? So I've talked about this on a previous podcast episode, just how do you come up with that business model? It sounds like with that pivot was also obviously a change in the business model.
Yes.
So could you talk about that a little bit?
Oh, yeah. That's really also something I wish I knew a little bit more about. You have to look at the market, and you have to understand where decisions are being made, and you have to understand, for us, what's important for the decision maker, the person with the wallet, what's important for the end user, because for us, that's two different things. The person with the wallet is the school principal or the head of curriculum. The user is the teacher. And so we had to understand, where is the money? At first, we thought that the teachers would either pay for it or they would tell their administrator, hey, I want to buy this thing. What we learned is that it's actually really scary for a teacher to go to their administrator and ask for money. That pathway isn't clear. Some teachers will do it and some won't, and even if they need it. And then we looked at direct to administrators. Could we call them up and say, hey, we have this offering? Well, they kind of tend to stick with the status quo. Well, we're just going to bring in Kathy that we had last year. And so we've actually, our pivot in business model is focused on the consultants. So now the consultants pay, I'm saying us, it's literally just me. The consultants pay me and I hold their hand and basically help them come up with this coaching program. And they work with their teachers. And then I give them whatever tech tools they need to work with the teachers. They're already in schools. They're already working with teachers. So I've kind of gone around the direct working with schools, which has worked.
And so could you, and this is like, I know it's so hard to kind of like look back and like granularly think about developing that business model. But I think a lot of people who are on this podcast, whether they're entrepreneurs or, to be honest, whether they're the government coming up with programs or whether they're, economic developers who are coming up with programs, I think a lot of people do something, and I'm sure you see this a lot. They come up with a fully baked idea, and they try to bring that fully baked idea to market, and it's not working. And so, if you could just talk a little bit about what it takes to, what you wish you might have done differently, right? And two, what it takes to walk back from that. And so, for the people who are listening who they've already done that, right? Yeah. They've already brought the fully baked idea to market, and now they're sitting there in front of their investors like, do you want to continue, yes or no? And, in your case, you said, I want to continue. I'm going to change the business model. Yeah. If you could just speak to that. Totally.
I think I'm totally guilty, right? Like, I did that. I'm an optimist, and I thought that my first idea or my first business model, people were like, oh, however many percentage of businesses fail. Every founder takes about 10 years to get to their, really to the right traction and all this. And I would think in my head, I'd be like, yeah. And then I'd think in my head, but not me. My idea is right. And
I love that.
I was so wrong. I was dead wrong. So I think the faster you can figure that out, like the faster you can reason with that fact that you are going to fail. Right. Your business model is probably not right. Like the people who get that right off the bat, man, they just got lucky. Like there's no way. And so the longer you let yourself live in well, that's not going to happen to me. You're just wasting time. Techstars has the theory, or they say over and over again, fail faster, fail faster. And I was kind of, in the beginning, I was like, what the heck does that mean? I don't really know what that means. I know what it means now. Right. I failed way too slowly. I would cling to ideas that I thought were right. I should have let them go and pivot every day, iterate, pivot. You can't, like the longer you hang on to your ego around something, it slows you. It's a dead weight, and you need to just keep moving.
So, but like, how do you do that? Yeah. You know what I mean? How do you, and so for me, I can tell you, I had this startup company, Receipt HQ, and I was an expert in the space. I knew what I was doing. I was a non-technical founder. I went through a terrible accelerator, like the worst, and I did not fail fast enough either. And I think for me, it was because when I was doing my customer discovery, I know that that's what it's called, but when I was interviewing people about, what their problems were, for me, I would go up to them and say, hey, like, where do you keep your signed copies of your receipts in restaurants? And they would say, oh, we've got this big box up, over here. And I'd say, oh, what do you do with it? And they said, well, we put it on the third floor. You should see. It's like a sea of boxes. And I was like, oh, wow, like this is a real problem. And then I realized that, but it's not a problem they want to pay to solve. Yeah. And that took me too long. I mean, I did it pretty quickly, like within a year, maybe, like within 8 months. But and I didn't take investment, but it was rough because I didn't listen. Yeah. And so if I could try to give advice to founders, it's almost like you have to teach them how to listen.
Yeah. There's a great book. I'll have to link it in the show notes. It's the one where it's like the questions you wouldn't ask your mom. What is it called?
It's the mom test.
The mom test. Thank you. So being new to the startup world, I bought all the books. I bought all the books on I read Continuous Customer Discovery, another great one. Had no clue what that meant. I read the whole book and I still couldn't grasp it. And Megan and I being teachers, one of the things we did right was build a foundation for everything. So we immediately built a system around this book, Continuous Customer Discovery. We use Airtable for everything. And so we built this whole Airtable where we would collect our interviews, we would analyze them, we would tag them. And I actually think that helped me because physically tagging it sounds silly, but with AI now you could do it even faster. But physically tagging that customer discovery interview and trying to identify the problems that they will pay for, have paid for, versus the nice to haves, it allows you to then kind of tailor your questions. So on that customer discovery interview I recently had where it just felt like, okay, this is customer discovery. One of the things she said, I had asked her about billing tools. So consultants, they have to bill schools and invoicing. And she was telling me exactly what you were just saying, what a pain it is. But then she said, but actually, I don't really actually need that right now. Right now, QuickBooks is fine. Boom, tag that. That's not a problem she'll pay for.
Right. Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is so hard, right? Because when you're hearing that customer discovery and you think that your idea is going to work,
you hear, oh, yes.
You hear, yes, absolutely. Like, and it's exactly what the mom test says, right? Like, oh, I would pay for that. That's like the biggest indicator. No, they would not pay for that. If they are not paying for it right now, how are you solving that problem today?
Right.
My favorite customer discovery question.
Yep.
Because people who have a real problem have to have a solution for it now.
Yeah.
And that solution, if it is like duct taped together and very difficult, that's an opportunity where you can start a business.
Yeah.
But if you have something that is like either like solving the problem really well or they are not trying to solve the problem, that's probably not a good market to go into.
That was the difference for us. School leaders would say, oh, this is cool. This is nice. I'll call you later. And that should have been my first sign that that's not the right. It's not that we had the wrong solution. It was that we were selling to the wrong people.
Sure.
And we may get them. I think we'll get them someday. But when I would talk to consultants, we'd get off the call and they would say, send me the paperwork. Where can I sign? Who do I write the check to?
Yep.
That's so different. That's
totally.
nice. That's cool. Call you later.
Yeah, that's so different. I completely agree. I know. Christine, do you have questions for us? I said that we were going to talk about the pivot. We did talk about the pivot.
I think that something that would be good to talk about would be when you failed slowly.
Yeah.
How did that feel in your body?
Yeah.
And if there's someone out there watching this and they're feeling that way while they're looking at their books, it's December, it's the holiday season.
Yeah.
How do they scrounge up the motivation to pivot?
I've got a good answer for that one.
You're ready for it?
Can you repeat that?
Yeah. Can you repeat that? I love that. Can you repeat that? So you've talked about, failing slowly.
Mm-hmm.
I like that, failing slowly. Failure to fail fast. How about that?
That is it. Yeah. That's
it.
the mistake. Okay.
So in that, what did that feel like? So we've talked a little bit about strategies to help you fail quickly.
Yeah.
But what did it feel like to fail slowly? And if there's anybody who's listening to this now, like, what would you say to them?
Yeah, this is a great question because I wish I would have had this answer when I was in that moment, and several moments. It's not just one. But I can remember specifically a time, and like I mentioned, this region has been incredibly supportive of me. And one of the ways I was supported, I was awarded the Women on the Rise Award, and went down to Albany to receive my award. I didn't want to go. I was probably crying getting dressed that morning. I brought my mom. I didn't talk to anybody. And the reason was that was right at the time when Megan and I were deciding whether to stop or not. And I felt like a fake. Women on the rise? I'm not on the rise. My kid was just puking last night. I, just cleaned it up off the floor and then got my dress on and came to this award ceremony. I, that whole time just felt like such an imposter and such a failure. And I thought, I'm standing up here telling people in the capital region that they can that they can follow their dreams. And I might have to go back to teaching. I can't pay my bills. What the heck am I doing up here? But what I know now is I think that the other people up there, some of them might have been in the same boat.
Oh, 100%. I hate those awards. Keep going.
It's like I thought that I had to have arrived.
Right. That's why they're terrible.
Yeah. Is there an arrival? Like, if there is, let me know, but I'm not there.
It's like this, it's like people pretending that like they're glossing over everything and having that cognitive dissonance that every entrepreneur has in those moments of like, am I a woman on the rise?
Yeah.
What,
I feel like one.
I don't feel like one. Like what, like that cognitive dissonance is like, I think it exacerbates a problem, right? Because it's almost like, you know, how you feel so strongly like my solution is right and I'm just going to move forward no matter what. It's like that's what those awards like require women to do, which is like to press on and like put on a good face.
Yeah. I was definitely putting on a good face that day. And not just that, a million other times. Every time someone would ask me, how's your little business going?
Oof.
Oh.
Oof. How's your little business going?
How's that little, what do you do? What's that little business thing you're working on? And it just, you're just like, okay, well, I wish I could tell you I was making $1 million and it was so great. And I don't know how to explain to you that I failed today. Yesterday, 5 minutes ago, I felt like this was the best idea in the world. Right now, I feel like it's the worst. And it's going to go like that over and over.
It's kind of like how all of those people who were Forbes 30 under 30 are in jail. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Hey,
like
I won the 30
Elizabeth.
under 30 for the Post-Star, okay? Not doing just fine.
Yeah. It's like, you know,
but
it is that Elizabeth Holmes phenomenon, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like you have to put on, I mean, I think we all see this, right? So for the tech founders who are not working in healthcare, but for the tech founders who are working on, you know, something else, like it is very much a mentality that like you pretend that everything is okay.
Mm-hmm. How many people are pretending? And by the way, I think I'm allowed to say this on this. It's for women. Guys are fine at pretending.
Yeah.
They will. And I tell myself that. Like, I am ridiculously honest. So when I go to an investment meeting, like this is how much money I make, blah, blah, blah. Like this is where our numbers are. That is going to be absolutely embellished with no problem.
Yeah.
By, a white dude that's the perfect founder of anything and brought all his own money to his tech startup. It's just, if everybody else is doing it, if everybody else is able to, it's hard for me to talk about myself in such a positive light anyway, that when I'm failing or like I feel like I'm failing, slowly is such a right word because it's like, it's painful, man. It's painful.
So that is so interesting for me. And it makes me think about, some of the work that I do is developing programs for entrepreneurs to help them succeed, right?
Yeah.
And so, but what your comment is making me think about is like the almost emotional support that is needed.
Yeah.
Now, I have lots of feelings on that, which we don't have to get into on this podcast. But I guess I would just offer kind of a moment and a platform for, what are the types of supports? Because it sounds like you got some of that emotional support from Palette, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So what are the other supports that you feel like were just not there?
In losing my co-founder, I lost that thought partner. We failed together, though. I mean, we failed together a lot of the times. But we always joked that, like, and it's kind of this way as when you're parents, like everybody's going to have a bad day, but the two of you can't have a bad day at the same time. So there's always this balance of like, we would come to meetings, my co-founder and I would say, oh man, I only have 10% today. She'd be like, okay. And she'd pick up the 90 or vice versa. So that piece, when she wasn't there, was a huge hole. But that wasn't the first time I felt that way. I think, the other kinds of support, and it's my fault that I need, not it's my fault, but it's my fault. But I should have surrounded myself with more people. I could have surrounded myself with more people. Being an introvert, I would see a meeting on my calendar for like a peer little mastermind get together or a coffee date, and I'd cancel it because I needed to get work done. So I didn't place enough importance on being around other entrepreneurs who are also facing those failures.
So this piece about kind of like a talent search, for your company? Because right now, like, the potential is for this CTO, and I don't mean to be focusing so much on that, but just as an example, right? I feel like a lot of at least the venture firms that were requesting investment from me, what they were talking about as their platform was to help their founders recruit talent. That was like the number one thing. I mean,
interesting.
Or like the common denominator between everything was this recruitment of talent. So when I think about the Capital Region, it's almost like if we could unlock the ability to recruit talent into entrepreneurial ventures, like, we would be way ahead of the curve.
Yeah, I love that. And keeping it local. I love a remote company. Like, that's great. But I do think some sort of in-person, keeping it local and having that in-person. Buffalo has a great startup ecosystem, and we applied for one of their 43 North program, and we got into one of the final rounds. So we were really looking into it. I was never going to move, though. I was just going to take the train. But that's one of the things they do is they have you hire. That's one of the requirements. The team has to be hired there in Buffalo, and you have to stay for a year and work with your team. And I thought that was really cool. And they gave you office space. What a great way to get you started within a community.
Yeah. And even 43 North has created a whole workforce development angle now. I think it's called Forge. And so it's interesting because that talent acquisition piece just seems to be such a cornerstone of venture right now.
Yeah. And for me, the draw for 43 North also was that I was going to be brought into their ecosystem of, for me, school districts and that idea that you could pilot right there in the area. So for me, that was another piece that really looked like a nice opportunity.
Yeah. So how do we do that in the Capital Region? Like, is anybody telling you here, like, hey, we're going to get you into school districts in the Capital Region?
No. And to be honest, it's been harder for me to get into school districts in the Capital Region. And maybe this is me and my own mindset, but I do feel a little bit like, oh, Alissa, what's she doing? And so, and I do hesitate to knock on the doors of the schools here. So if anyone's listening, no.
That's interesting.
I need to do that. I need to be better about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the two takeaways for me, like, as I am, just having conversations about building out the entrepreneurial ecosystem here, is like that workforce pipeline for startups.
Yeah.
We talk about workforce pipeline for large companies, Regeneron, Global Foundries, Plug Power all the time, but we talk about supporting founders. Yeah. But we don't talk about a workforce pipeline for startup companies. And then the second is the connections to customers. Like, why aren't we doing that? I mean, I feel like that is such a low-hanging fruit for us to be doing, because if we can create, if we can be a place where people say, oh, I can help you get customers, like Buffalo was doing for you. Yeah, that's, I'm in. For sure. Yeah. I'm in. Yeah. I love it. So every podcast, we always do a serious business lesson. Okay. My request of you is that if you have a business lesson, to look right here in this camera and give it to everyone.
Okay, great. I love it. Okay. My business lesson would be to make money in customer discovery. Kill two birds with one stone. We were just talking about how I have to get things on my to-do list done. And so customer discovery feels a little wishy-washy sometimes. It can feel like, what am I really getting out of this? Am I really making progress with this? Make money in customer discovery. What I mean by that is the way I double dip here. I have a service-based business. So right now I work with consultants. They pay me to coach them. In the coaching, I'm over here taking notes for customer discovery. And so I'm double dipping, and I'm able to make money as a founder who's not really making money otherwise, to be able to give them value by coaching them, and also to collect customer discovery. So make money in customer discovery.
I love that, make money in customer discovery. That's such a good business lesson for sure. Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode. I'm thinking about continuing this podcast, and I want to know if you like it. If you do, if you could drop me a note on LinkedIn or write something in the feedback, I would really appreciate it. And if you hated it, I guess you could tell me that too, but I really just want to know if you like it.